So please join me in welcoming Robin.
I am really happy to be here. Let's see. This will switch over. So I wanted to talk in two parts. I think we have an hour all told, right? And I'll leave time for Q&A. And so I thought, let me just move this like this, then I feel less trapped. So I wanted to tell you a little bit, some stories of starting Zipcar that I feel like they're like candy. They're fun to consume, but they don't have a lot of insight. And then I'm going to talk to you about where I think innovation is going in the US and around the world and how we can help. So Zipcar, I co-founded it in 2000, so it's going to be 15 years old this summer. And today there are, I think, 1 million users driving about 15,000 cars parked across the North America, in 300 university towns, as well as in London, in the UK. They just launched in Paris. They have some small outposts in Spain and Austria. And I'm telling these things in the wrong order, but why not? One of the things that's really lovely about Zipcar is the environmental benefits that it produced, and its example of how people are choosing Zipcar for their own personal self-interest. It's the financially smart, urban, cool thing to do. And on the other side of that, and here I'm very careful since I know a lot about giving bad statistics and how there's a lot of erroneous information going on about car sharing and other types of sharing. Each well-used Zipcar, which I would say almost all Zipcars are very well used, replaces 15 private vehicles. This is really very robust data when people come in and when they leave, whether they avoid buying or sell their car on the way in and on the way out, what happens. And while that's a really interesting, if we think of each car replacing 15 cars, that replaces 45 parking spaces because every car we have needs to have a parking space for home, work, and retail. So if you think about those 15,000 cars, that's 15 times whatever. I'm not doing the math here. So it's more than, I think, 100,000 cars that we have avoided the purchase of. And I think it's about 1% of the US car manufacturing supply, which I have to be happy about. But then there's all this interesting stuff. What can we do with that freed up parking space? But more interesting, in fact, is that when people join Zipcar, they have to make rational choices about whether to use a car or not. So, for example, I own a car and I want some ice cream. I say, great. I jump in my car, go get ice cream. If I'm a Zipcar member, I say, I'd like some ice cream. I think, wow, that'll be $12 an hour. You know what? I'm going to eat those stale cookies, and on the way home from work tomorrow, I'll get ice cream. So the net effect is that people drive about 80% fewer vehicle miles traveled because they're paying for the almost full cost of car ownership each and every time they drive. And so that is dramatically more important than what precise kind of car they drive. So I used to say that I would have been happy to put a Hummer into the fleet because people would have driven the Hummer one time, realized it was really dumb, and then chosen small, cheaper cars for all of their trips, which is what people do. But the biggest win is that they now have to rationalize using their car each and every time. So going back to starting Zipcar, Harvard Business School did a case on us, and it's one of their most loved cases. And as I was helping them write that, I was shocked by a couple of things. One was that this innovation came from Europe, that Europe had been doing car sharing in a crummy, old-fashioned way, and we applied technology. I say that when I was sitting at the cafe with my co-founder, and she said, she was German, she was sitting in a cafe in Berlin, she looked across the street and saw a shared car in '99, and I said, when I heard that, I thought, well, this is what the internet was made for, sharing specific resources really easily among lots of people, and this is what wireless was made for, getting that reservation from the internet directly to the car to unlock the car. So we really upped the game. Car sharing used to be a kind of crummy co-op mom and pop. There was like these big schedule books that you'd call up, make a reservation, they'd flip the pages, they'd look through. You had a little lockbox at each car, and each member was given a combination, and you'd open the lockbox, get out the key, use it. So it took me about 6 months to come up with the sentence, Zipcar makes getting cars as easy and convenient as getting cash from an ATM. But if I were to invent that sentence today, and why I think we succeeded was Zipcar made renting a car as easy and convenient as using your own car. And that was the fundamental amazing thing. And it was because we applied technology to that. The second piece that I realized that was kind of remarkable when we were doing this case is that we launched Zipcar on $75,000 from inception to the first cars on the street. And that really is miraculous. And I have not ever been able to do something quite the same again. And feel free to come sit up front. Don't feel shy. And what's kind of remarkable about that is also I'm not an engineer. So how incredible that I was able to pull this off. Things that were really annoying that I look at the state and federal governments that are barriers to a lot of transportation startups that are trying to do a lot of great work is our underpricing of, you know what I'm going to say, parking and CO2 emissions. So all the people that are trying to do really fabulous startups around ride sharing or car sharing or mode shifting, they don't get any of the benefits that we as government, we as state and local and every human environmental benefits, they don't get any credit for when they're making that better. So they have to scrabble together these really hard economic arguments without the most profound economic toolkit, which is they're reducing VMTs and they're doing mode shifting, which has dramatic, as you know, dramatic cost reductions on what the government has to pay for in terms of negative intangibles. So let me move on into this talk, and there's different ways of telling the Zipcar story. And today, I would say there are 3 reasons why I think we succeeded. And one of them was that we leveraged excess capacity. And what do I mean by that? Until Zipcar, there were 2 ways to enjoy using a car. You could either buy it or you could rent it. And when you bought it, it's $9,000 a year on average. You guys should know this, the household survey data, 18% of your household income to buy this one blasted car that then sits idle 95% of the time because you only drive it an hour and a half a day on average. So you're forced to pay $25 day in, day out so that you can have access to this car. I mean, it's a massive, incredible thing. And if, like every Zipcar member, you don't need a car to get to work, it means that's $125 5 days a week that is just sliding by. So if you wanted to have access to a car on a regular basis, you only had the choice to own it. You had to buy way more than you were interested in consuming. The second way you could buy a car or use a car was car rental. And we know 24-hour increments in these 24-hour bundles. Again, if I wanted it for 1 hour, if I wanted it for 26 hours, I was forced to buy the entire big thing. I could not make it any smaller. So because of those negative economics, people are being forced to buy a lot more. I knew we had this really great economic incentive because there was so much excess capacity in the way people were forced to consume. The second thing we did is we built a platform for participation. If you think about the old car rental model, which I'm still stunned 15 years after we showed them an alternative, you're still waiting in that line for 20 minutes to get the car. I knew that if we were going to rent a car for an hour, it had to take people seconds to get it. Otherwise, they would never rent it for an hour. And I also knew that as a company, if my transaction cost was $7 to $12 an hour, which is the transaction cost for car rental companies per each time you rent, I would never want to rent it for an hour. So I had to develop this platform for participation that made it the marginal cost of renting nothing and the speed of renting nothing. I had to make it as simple as possible, take complexity, drive it to its simplest way so that you could interact without me. The third thing we did is we thought about our customers as members, and I always treated them as collaborators. And you can think, this is today in 2015, we kind of think about this differently, but this was in 2000. And back to this car rental model, you can think about in car rental, there's the counter between us, and I'm the company, and I know that you are an incredible jerk, you're gonna treat my car poorly, and you're gonna ruin it, and you're gonna return it in bad condition. So I hate you. And you know, you're on the other side and you're thinking, hey, you advertised $19.95, but now you're making me upgrade and you're charging me lots for insurance and you're doing this surcharge for fuel. And so I think, as a consumer, I'm thinking, I can never trust you, car rental company, because you're always trying to screw me. So Zipcar said, you know what? No counter. Everyone is in this together. We're going to work on this together, and we're going to trust you to do all these things that car rental companies would never trust you to do, which lowers our costs. We're going to have you walk around the car and tell us if it's bad or not. We're going to tell us that it's dirty. We're going to actually give you our fuel card and have you fill it up when it gets to a quarter tank. We're going to ask you, what should we name them? What kind of cars? Where should we park them? So we really saw our members as collaborators. And this slide is continually of continual amusement to me. I have 3 children. These are people who are leaving the hospital with their firstborn, and they're saying, hold on, let's take a picture and send it to Zipcar. So we really were their friends, like they're part of them, their family. And I found this cartoon very recently, which I think really expresses it. So here's Moses coming down out of the mountain, and is there a section at the bottom for comments? We are so much co-creators right now that even God and us, we're like, okay, let's negotiate this. We're going to have this. And if we think about this word consumer, if you say the word consumer, doesn't it sound 1950s and maybe even 1940s? I certainly am not feeling like a consumer. I feel like I'm a collaborator. I'm in on this. I'm a participant. I actually create a lot of stuff. And this passive consumer thing is really an old-fashioned thought. So we put these 3 things together, these 3 components. I'm calling this organizational structure Peers, Inc., and it is really driving inventing this new collaborative economy and reinventing capitalism, and this is what I'll talk about today. You actually should recognize this, because there's a whole bunch of things that are happening this way. So, eBay is my stuff, and Linux is my code, and YouTube is my videos. Skype, which is kind of remarkable. They built a telecommunications company off the back of my laptop with my video camera and my internet connection. They didn't lay any fiber cables. They didn't have to do some massive, giant investment. They did invest a lot, but it was really leveraging all of my stuff. So if we think about leveraging excess capacity, it really is sharing, because excess capacity is saying this asset isn't all in my control. I'm going to be sharing it with other people. So fundamentally, tapping into excess capacity is sharing. And my favorite example is bed sharing. So get into your minds, bed sharing. I do a lot of travel. And when I travel, my first place I'd like to stay is, of course, at friends' houses in their spare excess capacity bedrooms that they might have this. Someone moved out, they have their, it's their home office. If I'm really lucky, I get a double bed, excess capacity. That's the bomb. And if I'm incredibly unlucky, I'm thinking, oh my God, the teenager got booted to the couch. Those are disgusting sheets. I don't want to be there. And so, of course, that's why hotels were invented. Hotels are really effective at bed sharing. When I had launched Zipcar, I had forbidden my staff to use the word car sharing. No one knew what car sharing was, and they were going to have to give it 5 sentences to explain it anyway. And sharing had all these connotations for it. It's going to be dirty, scummy, 1960s, I'm going to have to wait my turn. And with Zipcar, there's no waiting your turn, and it's certainly not going to be dirty and scummy, and it's going to be cool. And I'd say to my staff, imagine if we called hotels bed sharing, because they are exactly bed sharing. There's Zipcar is to car ownership as hotels are to your house. It's exactly the same thing. So I went and did some research on what are the largest hotels in the world. And the largest bed sharing in the world is the Intercontinental Hotel Group. After 65 years, it has 650,000 rooms in 100 countries. And you can see that was a lot of work, because the second largest hotel chain is Hilton. They've been around for 93 years and haven't been able to get so big. So many of you know what I'm going to say next. Airbnb, which is where I rent out my own room or my own house, in its 4th year had 650,000 rooms. And here I stand away from the microphone and say, that changes every single thing. It's incredible. This is transforming sector after sector after sector. What is happening here? If you can do this in 4 years, what took someone else 65 years to make, the world has transformed. And then there's Couchsurfing, which no money changes hands, and in its 9th year, it had 2.5 million beds that you could stay in every country. So what in heck is going on? What's going on is that before the internet made fiddling with small pieces easy and have very low transaction costs, companies had to do every single thing themselves. Their goal was to get as big as possible because it would lower those transaction costs of dealing with small parts. Why did we ever invent governments and companies and NGOs? We invented them to do things that we as individuals could not do. And so what is it that these big entities can do that individuals can't do? Spend lots of money. Things that cost millions and millions of dollars, you can't ask Rob and Chase to do. I don't have that kind of money. Things that require lots of different kinds of intelligence pulled together. I'm smart in 2 things. If it takes 10 things, I can't do it. If you want to have standards and something very consistent, I, Robin Chase, no matter how much I tell you, cannot force everyone to do anything because I'm just this puny little tiny person. I don't have the big power of some bigger entity. These types of all these kind of qualities are often kind of, I want to say, they're put into a brand. You know, when the US government does something, it has this feeling behind it. And they're typically global. They can act globally. On the flip side, individuals have things that they do really, really well that companies and governments have done and hated doing because it was very expensive. And those things would be like localization, customization, specialization. If you think about industrial capitalism, it was all about standardizing things, making things as similar as possible because all of those little tiny tweaks were expensive and painful and annoying. And so people do these things better. They also are much more creative than entities. And everyone wants to get into my social networks now and have me tell my friends about things. Well, it's me and my friends, I tell them those things naturally. So we can kind of put these things together. And they're incredibly complementary. And now we're seeing a whole bunch of companies built on back of this. This is what I'm calling Peers Inc. And the Inc. side builds the platform for participation, which costs a lot of money and is very effortful. And the peers are delivering this diversity of offering. So examples that you guys would recognize, or maybe not yet. So Car2Go that you have around here is a Peers Inc. organization. Velib and DC Bike Share, all of this bike sharing are that same way. There's a scooter sharing in San Francisco that's just about to expand, doing similar ideas. I like this idea around freight. 30% of freight trips are empty in trucks, and UShip is leveraging that excess capacity so that, I don't have these numbers here, I guess it says over $3 billion worth of goods shipped by all these people worldwide. It's a phenomenally big thing. Again, they're not having to go hire truckers and own trucks. They're leveraging excess capacity and shipping all this stuff. So this all boils down into this little yin and yang, and what's important to see with this is that it's complementary and symbiotic. The peers won't participate if the platform takes too much. And if the platform takes too much, if the peers want too much, like I'd say for ride sharing, everyone wants to do it for free, the platform says, I'm not going to even make a platform for you because you're not letting anything on the table for me to finance. So it's this really, this give and take around value, the value proposition. And it's all swimming in this sea of excess capacity. What I love about the excess capacity play is that it's resource and cost efficient. So we're getting more value out of existing things. Like, who doesn't want to do that? Individuals want to do that, companies want to do that, governments want to do that. We want to get more out of the same stuff. And if I think about how do I define this excess capacity, I think about it as stuff that already exists. It's been paid for, but there's more value to extract. And there's 3 ways that you can do this. One is that you can slice that excess capacity, and that's what Zipcar did, saying instead of buying this whole thing, you can get little pieces, just what you want. You can aggregate all the little parts, which is what Airbnb did. So Airbnb is not like 650,000 bed and breakfasts. It's a totally different proposition because of the standards and insurance and consistency. You can compare, contrast. The third way, which is really the most incredible way, is you can open it. And as I'm thinking about this, my next slide is not going to be what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about a government group. But think about the open data movement. That is all this. The government or the transit agency collected that data one time for its own purposes. They're making it open, and the platform is standard APIs. And then through that standards, innovators and companies around the world can say, hey, you know what? When I put those 2 things together and add them with my stuff, brand new value. The internet is a government-built open platform for participation. The free Wi-Fi spectrum is an open platform for participation, and most of the innovation that's happened in wireless has all been around the open piece of spectrum and not around pieces that we've auctioned off. So my example here is the smartphone. So think about the smartphone. Think about going one step back. Go to phones. Phones can only do one thing, and no matter how much, unless you were an incredible chatterer, you might be speaking on your phone for an hour a day. When they became wireless, when we had these nice wireless phones, that meant 23 hours a day you had this phenomenal wireless device that is just being single-purposed. When they opened that up and made it into these smartphones, now you have millions and millions of applications that have been thrown on top of that that don't merit buying the phone. I bought the phone for accessing Gmail, using navigation systems, and I don't know, maybe phone calls. I never talk on the phone now. But all of those other apps on top, they might be worth free, they might be worth 99 cents, they might be worth $10, but they are not carrying the whole purchase of that phone. So all of those people could innovate on the fact of this excess capacity, already bought this thing. So looking at the Inc. side, this platform for participation, what's amazing about platforms is that they give the individual or the small company the power of the large. So when we talk about technology has empowered people, I think it's not technology that's empowered people. It's very specific platforms that were created that have given me the power of the corporation, that have given me the power of the government. And with that, because they're platforms, they can grow incredibly fast because they've made things as standardized as possible, and all the variation happens underneath. And you get these economies of scale. So if we look at this around the smartphone and apps, in the first 5 years of the existence of smartphones, we had almost 2 million apps. And if you think of any 5-year period since the dawn of man, I bet we haven't had so much innovation as we saw on those smartphones. So the peers are delivering this diversity. And what this Peers Inc. model shows to me very profoundly is that diversity is not this politically correct blah, blah, blah word that we say, yeah, diversity is important, whatever. This is saying that diversity is critically important because we need to have people in different locations with different life experiences and different skill sets that are coming together and iterating on top of this. And they deliver all the innovation and also resilience and redundancy. So when, one Uber taxi driver isn't there, so what? There's another one. When one Airbnb owner doesn't feel like answering, so what? There's another one. It has this incredible resiliency. I started in France a company called Buzzcar, which is peer-to-peer car sharing. So if you think about Zipcar, the car owned the assets, and we'd only place them in places where we knew we would get a nice return on investment. With Buzzcar, people are renting out their own cars to their friends and neighbors. So if it gets rented once a year, the person thinks, great, I'm making more money, it's excess capacity. And so there's all these rentals that are excitingly happening in places where you would never put a car sharing car and you would never ever have a car rental company. And so these are pictures of owners in front of their cars, and you will see that there are all kinds of cars and all kinds of people with different price points. This is the south of France. Cool people, uncool people. Of course, we have some hipsters. And really, what's amazing about Buzzcar is the diversity of offerings. We have more than 70,000 cars parked across. People have 70,000 cars that they've put onto our platform that are being rented out. And you can do things with them that you could never do with Zipcar or Enterprise. So a member was telling me how she had gone to pick up the keys from someone to drive to an island off the coast of France called Ile de Ré. And when she picked up the keys, the owner said, oh my God, I love Ile de Ré. This is the side. If you drive on this side, it's these incredible cliff views. If you drive on this side, it's all these beautiful beaches. And this is my favorite beach, and here's my favorite fish restaurant. Zipcar and Enterprise are not going to tell you those things. And so in the US, there's get around and relay rides. In the Q&A, feel free to talk about regulation, because I have a lot of strong opinions about this. The reason I did not launch Buzzcar in the US is I could not get adequate insurance, but others were willing to. So the Peers Inc. organizational paradigm delivers 3 miracles. And I'm going to tell you about those 3 miracles, but I'm saving it for after me depressing you. And so I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes making you feel really bad. And if I can elicit a tear, I feel better yet. So my biggest concern right now is climate change. And the pace on which it is coming, I think, is ill-appreciated. So this is a report that was put out by the World Bank, conservative financial institution. 4 degrees is 4 degrees centigrade, 7 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the average global warming we will, if every country does everything it's promised to do, we will see by 2100 plus 7 degrees Fahrenheit, global average climate change. If you're like me, what in heck is plus 7 degrees Fahrenheit warming mean to me? Like, I don't understand that. It means nothing. So I did some research. The last time it was minus 7 degrees Fahrenheit, where I live in New England and across the entire upper half of the United States, was under several kilometers of ice, 20,000 years ago. So just picture in your mind, minus 7 degrees gives us a mile of ice in Boston, Massachusetts, where I just came from. That's the difference between that and where we are today. And we are going forward that same 7 degrees. And it's not going to happen in 20,000 years. We're supposed to be doing this in 85. When I was doing this research, when they say plus 7 degrees Fahrenheit globally, over land, it's going to be hotter. The predictions for North America, summers, plus 7 degrees Fahrenheit average. So some days it'll be plus 20 degrees average, and some days it'll be plus 7 degrees average hotter. So if we're thinking about those temperatures, that's if we did everything right. If we don't do everything right, we're going to be seeing that by 2060. So again, go to what it felt like, minus 7 degrees, those kilometers of ice to today, and go forward that by 2060. By 2040, we're going to be living in a hell. And we always are talking about, climate change, think about your grandchildren. Don't think about your grandchildren. Think about yourself in 15 years. Where do you intend to be in 15 years? What really strikes me, let me just see this, is the language that's being used by scientists, again, so cautiously. The difference between plus 2 degrees, which is what we're trying to hold it at, which means we have to peak emissions by 2020 and really by 2017. The difference between plus 2 and plus 7 is the difference between driving on an icy road at 30 miles per hour versus 90. It's risky at 30, but deadly at 90. We're on track for the deadly at 90. What they're saying is by 2100, there will be a couple 100,000 people. All those hundreds of millions of people around the world are not going to be around. And no one says it. They say catastrophic, not compatible with civilized humanity. This is what it means. These are the real words and what it means. And we're sitting here, and I'm flying down, and I'm talking to you, and I'm going to go to another meeting, and we're going to do our day-to-day stuff. It's kind of this crazy schizophrenic world that we are living in. Like, we're not going to have people, perhaps by 2060. It is a crazy thing, and we're just going about our days. So, my friend Benny Banerjee at Stanford, he had this great sentence: you can't solve exponential problems with linear solutions. And we're all sitting around here trying to do these same linear solutions. And I say, try Piers Inc. Let me tell you about these 3 miracles. So, number 1, we can defy the laws of physics. If I had said to you, go back to 2000, instead of launching Zipcar, I said, you know what? I'm going to launch the largest hotel chain in the world, and in 4 years, I'm going to be the biggest one. And you guys, and my husband, and me would have said, Robin, you're insane. You cannot physically build out that. You cannot beat them, because you have to go to 600, 4,500 locations around the world. You have to go find the land. You have to get the architect. You have to do the financing. Then you're going to have to build it. And then you're going to have to get the furniture. And you have to get the staff. You're going to have to hope that you chose right in every one of those places, because you're going to have to do this on target. And there can't be any hurricanes. We would have all said, physically impossible. Physically impossible. You can't do it. So this is what business as usual asset building would have looked like over the first 6 years. And here's what Airbnb delivered, because it was leveraging excess capacity. I want you guys to be thinking a lot about, we need to do things with the stuff we have right here, right now. I feel like the US government and everywhere and us were saying, yeah, let's do some fancy blue-green algae new fuel source. Let's build, some high-speed highway between here and there. or high-speed rail, I think those things should be happening, and let's put a small amount of our attention to that, but put the vast majority of our attention on getting these things driven down right now, right now. And this is leveraging excess capacity. Here's some growth curves of other companies. So Etsy is a Peers Inc. company. It's people selling their own stuff on top of their platform. You can see that it takes a long time to get the platform going. Once you get that platform right, it really moves fast. So they grew 50% in 2013, and I keep watching they haven't released 2014 yet, but I think it's another 50% that they grew. BlaBlaCar, a fabulous transportation example. So I tried to do ride-sharing in the US, and I raised money for it, and I did it for 2 years, and after 2 years, I said the US isn't ready for that, and I gave the money back. I launched that company in 2007 with my friend Fred Mazzella in Paris launched his in 2007 in Europe. You can see the same thing. It takes a long time to get all the parts together, to get your platform to be really simple, to have it to sing. Today, he transports 2 million people every month through ride-sharing. And we're talking real ride-sharing. Paris to Lyon, me driving, 3 empty car seats. So he's moving 2 million people a month, which is the same as 5,000 high-speed rail trains, 5,000 747s. He didn't lay a track, he didn't buy a train car, he didn't buy a plane, he didn't build the channel. All of it was built off of excess capacity, moving very fast. This is the speed of growth for Uber and Lyft and Sidecar. So this is January to November 2014. You can see that they grew, look in this middle column, 500%. Lyft, 416, Uber, 50%, Sidecar. You can have unbelievable rates of growth. So again, these platforms are leveraging co-investment in existing assets by others to make real change really fast. Miracle number 2, we can tap exponential learning. If I think of the size of the problem and how fast we have to learn, if we think about learning, it's iterations. So how many times can I do something and learn better? And companies, we think, can learn faster because they have more iterations. But this requires paying attention. So my favorite example is a company called Duolingo, and it offers free language learning. The unit of measurement for language is how much can you learn in a semester of university, and it's 130 hours. So the old standby favorite top of the line was the Rosetta Stone, that if you worked for the World Bank or maybe the US government or your company was paying, you would buy the Rosetta Stone, expensive language learning, but it only took you 54 hours to learn that same amount. We would say, wow, only 54 hours instead of 130. How great. So Duolingo comes along. I was talking to Duolingo's CEO. He tells me, I can conduct 100 experiments simultaneously with 150,000 people iterating on each one of those experiments, and in 48 hours tell you precisely the best way to learn a language. And he's got it down to 34 hours. On average, people learn a semester's level of language in 34 hours. And this is really robust data. He has an ongoing team, an ongoing 30,000 people out of millions who are taking it, that he keeps testing to see that this is true. And he's had some outside researchers, university, go look at it. So we can learn fast. This is Duolingo's growth curve. They launched in August 2012. Today they have more than 50 million users. They're teaching a language to more people than every child in the US public school system. And think about excess capacity. Process is also excess capacity. And when we talk about language, it's always a language pair. I'm English and I'm learning French. It's English to French or English to Spanish or Spanish to French. So a year and a half ago, he opened up his process and he said, anybody can create language pairs, Estonian to Croatian, Balinese into Chinese. And so people could, on their own, leverage his platform and make these new language pairs. Out of all the people who are learning languages on his platform, 15% are learning language pairs that he didn't even create. Miracle number 3. Because we are tapping into this diversity of peers, the right person will appear. And it's not Superman. If you think about Superman, Right now, every one of you is more powerful than Superman. All he can do is fly and is strong. He gets the call. He doesn't know what the traffic patterns is. He doesn't know what the fastest way to get there. He didn't get to search in Wikipedia to find out all the right things he should know. And most of all, he didn't have eyes on the street. So this is not my picture, but it looks exactly like what happened to me. This last Thanksgiving, I was going from Boston to my in-laws in New Hampshire. Wednesday afternoon before Thanksgiving, there was a foot of snow falling that afternoon at twilight. We were 5 of us in the car. My husband has Waze going, even though he has driven that trip 150 times, so he drives me crazy. I think you know this path. So he has Waze going. My 24-year-old son's in the front seat, and he says, "Wow, look at that!" And I'm thinking, wow, there must be a deer running across the street. And so I look forward, and no, there's a car accident in real time happening immediately before us. These two cars crash together. This is kind of slow motion as they spin off the road, and we are directly behind. The person in this lane must have pushed the button because Waze says, "Caution, accident ahead." And I'm thinking, this is phenomenal. Like, I'm like right there, but no, there's a person right here reporting. So with these, the right person will appear. We have so much diversity that there's the right person at the right time with the right expertise who can deliver us what we want. If you think of Yelp recommendations versus Zagat or Michelin Guide, it's because your neighbor down the street recommended or reviewed the corner grocery store, the corner hardware store. It's because everyone is participating that we're getting this stuff out. When we think of all those challenges, all the challenges are based on the fact that we're scanning this huge number of people, and among those people, there's going to be some brilliant, exactly right person, and we're going to find them this way. This is all these Peers Inc. So here's Waze's. This is just a very cute and old one I found off the web, but they are more than 50 million users too. When I think about cities, the thing I just want to point out, and it's much harder to point this out in the US, but we know that we're moving towards a path of increasing urbanization. We cannot go forward with the path of 1.1 cars per adult, and we can't go down the path of even 1 car per household. Cities are getting so dense, we cannot fit them in. And so I just want to, let me step away here. It's really phenomenal. So New York, one of our most dense cities, only 50% of the people own a car. And that's how dense New York looks like compared to Dhaka, or compared to Cairo, or compared to Istanbul or Sao Paulo. So when you get to these other cities, so Paris, where I live, only 40% of the households have cars. And I gave a talk in Mexico City where it is gridlock, 100% gridlock all the time. Their BRT runs on something like 15-second intervals, and it is like this, because there's not enough of it. And that's what it looks like when you have 44% of the households owning cars in a city that is too dense. So as we densify our cities, we cannot have this type of mode dependence. And then again, just some nice things that you probably have seen. This is distances driven per license, per household, per licensed driver, per vehicle, per person. It's going down. It has nothing to do with 2008 economics. It has nothing to do with all sorts of things. There's a really nice report put out by US PIRG that went through these. So as you push forward your projections, and I think the Highway Administration just reduced its projections for VMT standards by something like 25%, and might even be 55%, what they pushed, the expectations are for the future. We should not be building any more roads, period. So here again, total VMTs and per capita VMTs dropping. So I'm going to close with this idea. We are definitely shifting from what I think of as industrial capitalism, which is where you succeeded, we succeeded by hoarding resources and creating scarcity, creating patents, trademarks, copyrights, special certifications, because the collaborative economy delivers more value. And I will explain that to you. So, 4 pillars that I've uncovered here. Because of the internet now, this is what's transformed things. So if you think of assets, we can now have shared connected assets, and they always deliver more value than closed proprietary ones. And they're delivering more value 2 ways. 1 is that you're making them work more efficiently, and 2, you can find brand new value out of it. So Open, connected assets always, always deliver more value than closed ones. You can't argue with it. And if you want to, you can feel free. If we think about people, more connected. You guys are smart. You're so smart. Excellent. There are more smart people outside of this room. We know that to be a fact. Now that we can actually tap them and reach them because we are connected, it is a fact that when you want to do innovation, when you want to figure out smart things, you are not going to be looking at your own guys in-house. You need to be looking out. More networked minds are smarter than fewer unconnected minds. If we think about collective action, the problems and opportunities provided by open networked resources are dramatically greater than the problems caused by open connected resources. So if you think about Wikipedia when it was made, yes, there's going to be people write graffiti. Yes, there's going to be some lies on it. So what? It's a small percentage. We fixed it. We fixed it on an active way, but instead we have the world's encyclopedia, this phenomenal thing. And I actually think a lot about, let me go to this next one. And as an individual, when I participate and when I contribute to shared networked assets, I always get more than I give, because I'm giving my little tiny puny thing and I'm getting the world's worth of their little puny things all together. And I think kind of government, that's what government is supposed to be. I pay my taxes and I get a whole library, you know, that we look at these principles, I feel like they're facts. Like, we can't contest these as truths, but the critical piece is that people are connected and that the internet is free and open and accessible, that we have those things happening. But when they are, this is what it delivers. So, I had something else to say on that. Yeah, one more piece. So think of the rate of change that we are in today. We know we are in this incredible, breathtaking rate of change. Things are moving so quickly. So this organizational structure that's going to happen no matter what, it delivers us this ability to have lots of iterations, and if we're paying attention, those iterations will enable us to iterate, adapt, and evolve at a very much better and faster pace, which is what we need to survive as individuals, as companies, and as governments. We've got to start being able to make these transitions faster. And yes, I did just write a book that's coming out in a month, and I want you to pre-order it because I'm on the beat to address climate change and income inequality through these issues, but also to explain this phenomenon is absolutely happening. So that's what I have to say. Do you guys have questions? Yeah.
That you were talking to, do you think...
Can you stand up? Oh, you are. Thank you. Louder.
Okay. So do you think the industries that you say are very standardized, do you think they're going to start to recognize the power and the...
They are. Industry after industry. So let me...
Where do you think they would... How do you think they can go from here?
So let me just give you some examples. So this word MOOCs, massive online coursework, right? So that the people who give the best talks, who are best at talking, are putting their things online, and now, 200,000 students will look at those things. So it's transforming education. We'll still be having classrooms, but classrooms will be for the customized, specialized piece, and the other part you'll be doing at home. Think about energy systems. Don't we think that distributed energy creation is much better than the build another coal plant? To have this, to enable us to everywhere, people to co-invest and put people and individuals to co-invest with renewable energies in real time. Think about impending 3D printing, that we're moving from factories to a recipe that will be the platform for participation, and my printer will be a platform for participation, and manufacturing will be done locally. Around networks, we have much more people and companies are leveraging multiple networks rather than just doing one network. So your smartphone now switches you over to Wi-Fi instantly whenever it can and gets you out of their congested network. So we're seeing this, and then big companies. Pfizer is very famous for this. There's a company called Innocentive that works with Pfizer, and Pfizer had 3,000 scientists, and the 3,000 scientists said, let's publish our unsolvable problems. These are things that we think we can't figure out, unsolvable. They publish them, and if you are, anyone can read these, and if you give them the solution, they pay you $30,000. And so they publish their unsolvable problems, and people around the world solve their unsolvable problems. And they're the people who solve them. A friend of mine, Kareem Lakhani, is at Harvard Business School, and this was his research, and he's also doing this for NASA, has also been doing it. The people who are solving the problems are the ones that are farthest from the silo that it used to be in, because they're thinking the same old way. All of the challenge and prize stuff is think about this. So definitely, innovation is a mechanism that big companies are eager to go out. The Army 2 years ago did something called, remember Apps for Democracy? You guys might not be sure from DC. So Apps for Democracy was the first open challenge with Vivek Kundra. He was CTO for DC. And then after they did Apps for Democracy as a challenge, he was hired by Obama to become CTO for the White House, and they did opendata.gov. And then someone did apps for the Army, and it was just opened up to the Army engineers who worked for the Army, because of course we're secret, we have too much security issues. We don't want to open it up to the world at large. So they first opened it up only to the people within the Army, got some great innovation, and then the next year they opened up to them and the contractors, and now the Army is doing apps. They say, here are problems, and anybody in the world can be doing the answers. So you can do this stepwise opening up. Other questions? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jeff Price from Federal Transit Administration. When I was at Arlington County, I worked with Chris Hamilton, and here was a local government who knew that this was supporting our transit lifestyle, our smart growth lifestyle. But when FlexCar and Zipcar came to us, by the way, it was great that we had two, we needed to say it's a pilot and break all the rules and put the vehicles on the street and tell the local businesses that we're actually bringing more people. And so we had to sort of pilot it. What's that role? That's the role that local government had to play back in 2001. What does the federal government need to do to facilitate these innovations?
I wrote some of these things down here because I was thinking I was going to talk to you guys. One thing that I didn't say earlier was insurance. Every single thing I've ever done has been innovative and not the way it was done before, and insurance companies are extremely risk averse, and they don't know how to tell what the risk is, so they won't offer me insurance until I've done it for 3 years, and they can see 3 years worth of how they should price it. So I keep feeling like the federal government is so ideal for this initial risk, this initial phase, so we can get experience on what are the risks, and then the private sector will be happy to stay in. And as a company, as an innovator, I was happy to pay something, but no one would sell it to me. Like I was happy to buy insurance, but I just could not even get it. So that's what's happening with ride sharing, and that's with Lyft and Uber, and the pain in the neck with insurance, which I realize as I'm looking at you guys, is it's state by state, and it's a giant drama. And so anyway, insurance is one. The whole open. I want you to think about how you can create platforms for others to innovate on. So I was saying that the internet is a government-financed platform. GPS is, in fact, a government-financed that was excess capacity. It was created, to fend off Cold War bombs. And then in 1996, Reagan said, you know what, there's some excess capacity here, let's open it up for others. And now there are millions and millions of, I'd say the peers for me are small companies and individuals around the world think of new ways to use GPS that the government could never have thought it up. So think about what are things that you can create as platforms for participation. And you want to put as few, you want the constraints to be at the platform level and not at the people, the peers level. So examples would be, let's go to Uber and Lyft. They have created a platform, and so there's a lot of argument, and then we look at existing regulation. What we know about regulation, and maybe another thing government can be doing, is looking at regulation that is dumb. that is just old-fashioned and dumb. It might have been a good idea in 1900, but it is so wrong now. So in New York City, for example, Uber was not allowed to launch in New York City. What was the reason? Because the Taxi and Licensing Commission had said, you must use this device to measure distances. You can't use GPS. It's not an approved device. And I think, that's a dumb rule. You know, so that was a rule that they could say, your GPS is not an approved device for measuring distance to tax people, to do fares. So I think there's all these crazy rules that are dumb that we need to be removing. And then going, again, when I look at the taxi versus Uber piece, and same thing with Airbnb and hotels, do we really think that every car and driver has to go get certified? Or can we say cars in the US have to get inspected every year and no one should be driving in an unsafe car? And that's the way it is. Like right now, you're supposed to be having your car inspected. Or you can say old cars. And say, so Uber has said no car older than 2008. And then we've already at a federal level said those cars should be safe. And we could say, yeah, you should be doing a background driving check. But it should be things that are done at the platform level, not the individual running down to go get his license, stand in a long line, do some crazy thing. So we want to, if you want innovation, you have to make it much lower. Things that I'm yearning to have happen in the transport sector. I'm also, I'm right now on the Massachusetts Department of Transportation Board, where I'm hoping to squeeze in some things. Now we're having this big calamity, so it sucked everything else out. But as platforms participation, you guys do control some roads. And so what kinds of things could be happening on those roads that would be innovative? You know, I yearn for, can we have the lightweight, low-speed lane? Because no one will get into a smaller vehicle ever because they're up against a truck. And so we're all driving around in our single occupancy massive cars, and it's kind of killing me. I'd love to see a lane that was just maybe even a lane split. Imagine, it's hard to say on those highways, but if I think of in cities and the in-between, imagine if we had one lane was for light vehicles that only go 20 miles an hour, no faster, and are only 3 feet wide. So you could be on your bike, you could be on your electric bike, you could be on your motor scooter, you could be on your enclosed, cool, whatever. But we could have much higher throughput, and people would feel safe to scale down, but now no one feels safe to scale down. But so I feel like we have to think really creatively to make these changes fast. And let me just tell you a few more examples to get you thinking about this excess capacity in platforms. So Ciclovia in Bogota, Colombia, on Sundays between 7 a.m. and 2 p.m., a lot of excess road capacity. No one's driving, so they shut down 130 miles worth of roads to motorized traffic you can use for unmotorized traffic. 2 million people use that come out to play every Sunday. Like, this is a phenomenal platform for participation. It costs 10 cents a person to provide that level of happiness. Here's another obscure example. So Amazon used to sell only its own stuff, but we now know it sells other people's stuff. But it was those processes that they just said, instead of just doing it with our stuff, we're going to open it up to corner bookstore and other companies. And now 40% of their sales are other people using those processes that were developed that way. And if we think of Alibaba, largest IPO in the world, it's only everyone else's stuff, right? So if we think about the government resources, you guys are fabulous on standards and consistency. You do have a lot of processes that you could be simplifying. You do have these big assets that we need to be able to create let me do one more of these. The toll transponders, it's one that kills me. So you're buying this $30 device that is literally used, if you're a heavy traveler, 15 seconds a month, just as you just pass that little thing. And all the other time, all of the communications and the device is just idle. And so we have required this device, and I think it's crazy. When we invented open road tolling in 1991, or electronic payment, that made sense. But we're 2015. I should be able to pay 10,000 other ways. actually, I could keep going, but ask other questions.
I'm in the Office of Small Business here,
Yes.
and my question is, I thought I heard you say in the beginning, the $75,000 needed to start up. How did you get that, or did you have investors or what?
I got that through 2 angel investors, but then within the next 4 months, I did raise a lot of money. When I think about SMEs, so I was on the Secretary of Commerce's Advisory Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship. What struck me is that I lost out on my advice in that group. So there were 18 of us and lots of venture capitalists, some entrepreneurs, and a lot of university presidents. And the outcome of that thing was to give tax breaks to venture capitalists and those funds, because the idea was we need to make money cheap, make them, let's say, the trickle-down effect. And I think that there's a huge number of entrepreneurs who are driven by passion, and the reason they can't do those, they're going to kick and scream and work hard, and the reason that they can't do things is like, I don't have insurance, I have to pay back my school loans. Like, they can't take any risks just to survive, and so the cheap rates up here are not going to cause me to innovate down here. And so in as much as we can create programs where we reduce their required outlay, I think is even more powerful than giving them money. So if I can, you know, if I can give you relief on your student loans for the first and whatever, but those things is what's constraining innovation, that entrepreneurs and family people can't participate. Other questions? Yeah.
So you talked about miracles and you talked about capacity. So do you see existing industry, if you will, changing? So for instance, in the movie Miracle on 34th Street, you know, the Macy's Santa Claus was referring people to gimbals, right? So do you see something like an air hotel occurring, say, you know, Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, whatever? So in other words, are the industries changing to adapt?
The industries, so in this book, I have a chapter on changing legacy institutions, and I threw in big business and government into that because they're both legacy. And my first crack at it was, they're all going to fail. And then my editor said, wow, that's rather negative, Robin. And so I circled around and said, you know, they can do these things and do these things. Legacy industries are now, as I say, in the idea of innovation, they are really they're opening up in many ways to do these little pilots and do these little things. And then the challenge for them is they do that little pilot, and then it gets brought in-house, and then the in-house antibodies kill it off. And then I was thinking about Ford or all the car manufacturers. What is incredibly hard about being a legacy company is that the first time I went up to Ford, I thought, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm going to tell you guys what's what, and here's what the future is, and you guys have got it all wrong. And then when I got there, I thought, wow, you have 183,000 employees and these types of plants. The reality is that no matter how much innovation they do on the side, and now they're doing a lot of experiments on the side, that worker is never going to, this is going to grow, and that worker is never moving over here. And that's the challenge that we know, is that individual workers aren't moving over from old ways of doing things to the new ones on a real one-by-one person basis. You know, we always say, yeah, the economy's going to be disrupted, but it's going to open up new avenues. And I think, yeah, it is going to open up new avenues in 15 to 20 years. But that person who lost their job is not, you know, in Minneapolis or wherever, is not going to be finding another job. So I have lots of things to be depressed about. One is climate change, and the second is I think we're going to see deep, horrible transformations in unemployment in the next short while, because everything that can become a platform is going to become a platform, without question. And a lot of those things will produce a lot of efficiencies and productivity improvements, and individuals are moving. I just had this new sentence that works in the US. People are moving from W-2s to 1099s, and our protections for 1099 workers is nothing. So we are going to be seeing really hard challenges ahead. So we need to be thinking about the 1099 world.
And do you see a role for government in sort of, smoothing out that
Yes,
risk
I do.
profile?
So smoothing out the risk profile is we have to start thinking that everyone is moving to 1099s, and so we have to be moving social safety nets, workplace regulations over, all of those things that right now is tied to full-time employment. Whatever they are, it has to move over and do the same protections. And the second piece is to create as many platforms for participation as possible. That when we build anything, we should be thinking about it being multi-purposed. When we buy, when the U.S. government as a buying agency should be forcing as much openness as possible, which they are. So they're saying, is open source the default? Are open devices the default? Is open spectrum the default? It's hard for me to think about transportation. When we open up a road, are we saying, yes, put whatever cables you want down there right now, because this is a multi-purpose venue? And to stop doing things like, I was just in Indiana last week, the Indiana privatization of its roads, when it privatized those miles on a 75-year lease, the pace of change is way too high now to be doing 75 and 99-year leases. Cannot be doing those lock-ins because it is just way too fast-moving. So always keeping your options open and building more platforms for participation. Yeah?
All right, well, thank you. And thank you all for coming to our first Innovation Series speaker, and we'll keep you posted on more. I would also just like to acknowledge we have the mayor of Palo Alto here visiting us, and Councilwoman as well. So say hello to them on your way back. So again, thank you.